Hey guys, welcome back to another video. If you're new to my channel, hi, my name is Miranda and I teach about anything and everything related to the trucking industry and how to navigate it. So if this is a topic that interests you, feel free to subscribe down below. Well, it's November 13th, aka middle of the month, aka I'm freezing, and it's time to look at what is going on in the trucking industry, in the freight market as of November 2022. Honestly, I'm in such a fog right now because of the numerous amounts of changes we made within our company that I couldn't even tell you a quick summary without looking at the facts and figures first. So let's go ahead and look at the board. Ready? Let's go. As always, we start all of these videos with a look at what is going on with the fuel prices. So as you can see, I always put in what happened during this whole year from January all the way to November. And right now in November, it went up from October. As you can see, it's $5.36 per gallon for diesel on average. Now for my visual folks, here is a little chart that I'm going to make a little bit smaller, showing you how the price has changed. As you can see, there was a peak in June right here, and then it went slightly down, plateaued, and now it's going back up again. As of September, it has been climbing back up, unfortunately. Now let's take a look at the top 5 most expensive states when it comes to fuel and the top 5 least expensive states. So of course, no surprise here, the most expensive state is California at $6.27 per gallon in November. However, it did go down since last month. Last month it was $6.66 in California, so that's awesome. Now, the rest of this is not as good as last month. First of all, the states completely changed. As you can see, Oregon, Washington, and Nevada are nowhere to be seen this month. Instead, the second most expensive state is $6.17. Whereas last month it was Oregon at $5.72. And basically the third is Pennsylvania, then Connecticut, then Rhode Island. But you can see that the least expensive of the 5 most expensive states is still higher than it was last month, unfortunately. All right, now to the 5 least expensive states. Of course, as I always say, no surprise, Texas is the least expensive. And the great thing is that the price per gallon average actually went down from last month. Last month it was $4.77. Now it's $4.69 on average. And then the states changed a little bit. Louisiana is the second least expensive, then it's Oklahoma, Mississippi, and Arkansas. But you can see that the most expensive fuel out of the least expensive states is actually the same price as last month, which makes me feel pretty good. Unfortunately, at the moment, we're in the kind of position where when fuel is $4.90 and hasn't changed, that's already a good sign. Oh, how adaptable people are. Okay, the next chart I want to show you right here, it's actually going to be a few charts, and this is our performance for our reefers and flatbed. Dry van, as you can see, we don't have any data because dry van has been stationary this month. I'll explain why later on. But for now, let's take a look. As you can see, our flatbed is way outperforming the reefers, right? The blue line is the no deadhead miles, and this is with deadhead. Now, the reefer, the reason it's so low at the moment, and we're hoping to change that towards the end of the month, is because we ended up getting stuck in several bad markets a couple of times. Now, let's take a look at this chart right here. Now, I know you guys won't see it. This is from September all the way to now. This is our reefer performance. As you can see right here, this is when we were trying to get out of the bad market. But in general, if not for these markets, it's pretty much the same as it was in September. Nothing really changed. The rates seem to be still the same. Now let's take a look at our dry van. Again, we don't have much data for this month because it has been stationary, but this is what has been happening since September through November. In the beginning of November, we had 1 load in November, and you can see it also, except for this outlier, it's been pretty much the same. Nothing really changed. Again, I don't know what is happening with the dry van in November because we haven't moved any loads. But now let's take a look at the 3 equipment types side by side. The orange line is the dry van right here. The blue line is the reefer, and this green little line is the flatbed. As you can see, most of the time the reefer has been outperforming the dry van. But again, the dry van hasn't worked. The flatbed is doing really well compared to the reefer. And it's no surprise because the market right now is for flatbeds. Will it change? Yes, probably it will. But at the moment, flatbed is staying strong, so I'm pretty happy about that. As always, I show you the market maps for all three equipment types. So here we are for dry vans. As you can see, in the previous month, it was pretty blue all around. This month, it's pretty surprising. It looks like the West Coast is coming alive for the dry van. There are also some states in the middle here that are coming alive. Some states are doing worse, like Indiana, Ohio, and Pennsylvania compared to last month. But then Tennessee is a little bit better for dry vans as well. Again, I cannot confirm nor deny this because we have not been working on a dry van. Let's take a look at the reefer. So here we go with the reefer. This is last month and this is this month. So as you can see, things are changing on the West Coast. The West Coast is warming up for the reefer as well. Now, I am not sure because we have stayed away from the West Coast. What I can tell you is that Texas, despite looking a little bit bluer, Houston and Dallas, Texas are much better for reefers than they were last month. On top of it, of course, states like Minnesota, I mean, they were good last month too. Minnesota is the end-all be-all state for reefers. If you can get there because you're gonna go out for like $3.50 per mile. It's worth it. But in general, there are some states that are warming up for the reefer this month that were pretty cool last month. So that's great. Let's take a look at the flatbed. And for the flatbed, we can see that Oregon got a little bit warmer. California stayed pretty much the same. And other than that, there's not much change from last month that I can see for a flatbed. Now, as always, I show you guys the DAT market trends. And the things I like to look at is the load posts and truck posts. As you can see, truck posts on the DAT load board increased by 5.74%. But so did loads. Loads increased by 2.5%, although this is not enough to cover the amounts of trucks posted. So nothing to get too excited about here. We can see that for reefers, the load to truck ratio has increased by 7.4%. And that means that the rates also increased. So basically, now there is a little bit of a tighter capacity for reefers. And as I was saying before in previous videos, there will probably be a very minimized peak for reefers because they transport perishable goods. So for reefers, it's no surprise. For flatbeds, the load to truck ratio went down. For vans, it went down, and so did the rates. Now let's take a look at the tender rejection index because I think this is very important. As I mentioned in my last video, and this is something that I also learned, I didn't know this like a month ago. Tender rejections are when a contract carrier says, no, I'm not moving that load, and that load trickles down to the load board, right? So we want to see a tender rejection rate that is high because that means more loads are moving to the load board, more freight to choose from. That means the rates are going to be higher due to supply and demand. Unfortunately, as you can see, this is from September to November, and you can see that the tender rejection rate has been going down. Currently, as of today, it's at 4.08. In September, it was 5.73. In December, it was 20 something. So tender rejection rates are going down, which means less and less loads are getting pushed down to the load board. And if there is less freight on the load board and a ton of trucks, that means rates are continuing to go down. Now that we have looked at the board and now that I'm starting to remember what actually happened this month, I want to share my personal experience with the market. So there are a few things I want to mention. Number one, as you already saw from the numbers on the board, we did not have any operations for the dry van for most of the month. And this is because my business partner who actually operates that dry van has finally taken a vacation. I am so happy. But on the other hand, unfortunately, I will not be able to speak to the dry van market this month. Now on to our reefers. And honestly, it has been quite an interesting month. I know that the numbers look wacky, and this is because we have found ourselves in really bad market areas a couple of times. Florida, for example, is a place you really do not want to go to. If you can avoid it, avoid it. A few years ago, I was able to book, and I would do this, I would book a load to Florida for an obscene amount of money and then deadhead to Georgia, so that the load with that deadhead would end up being something like $2.50 per mile. And then out of Georgia, there were always pretty good loads that you could take to get out of that area altogether. In today's market right now, unfortunately, if you go to Florida, there is nowhere you can deadhead in order to get a better rate, because Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, all of these states, they have pretty crap rates. On top of it, the tolls in that area are quite high. So basically, you're losing money trying to get out, you're losing money on tolls, and the fuel prices are also insane there. So just stay away from the Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina market if you can, if you have a reefer. Now, the Midwest, specifically the state of Minnesota, I am still under the impression that Minnesota for reefers is the single best state you can be in, because the outbound rates are insane. And there are loads there even after 5 p.m. Basically, this is the place where you will be making money. But the Midwest in general is a pretty good place to end up in, because the outbound rates are pretty decent. Minnesota is crazy good. Illinois is pretty good. Indiana, Ohio are decent. This is the area you really want to stay in if you have a reefer. Now for Texas. Now, as some of you know, Texas is my favorite state of all times. I can't even explain why. I just am obsessed with that state, even though I have never been there. But Texas, a few months ago, it kind of died. There were no loads there. This is not the case this month. If you have a reefer and you end up in a market like Dallas, or especially Houston, Texas, there are finally loads to choose from. Are the rates incredible? No, they are not, but you can easily get something for $2.40 per mile, $2.50 per mile, so it's pretty decent. Another thing I noticed is Arizona. Arizona last month was horrible. This month, it has finally started coming alive, sort of, for reefers. That being said, even though there are more loads to actually choose from on the load board, unfortunately, the rates still leave much to be desired. Now for our flatbed, as some of you already know, I have released a video a couple of weeks ago. We actually rented a flatbed because we decided we really wanted to try our hand at that particular market. Now, this is my first time working with a flatbed, so my market knowledge for this equipment is theoretical at best. I still have a long way to go before I actually become comfortable with this equipment type. To top it off, it's quite a learning curve trying to understand all of the different things you need to secure a load. Nevertheless, we are in full operation with the flatbed and we are doing pretty well, as you saw from the numbers. This equipment type is outperforming the reefer. Now, I have noticed a couple of things in my limited experience of actually working with the flatbed. Number one, the Midwest is decent, but it's nowhere as good as it is for a reefer trailer, for example. Number two, New Mexico is not a good place to end up in if you have a flatbed because the loads are scarce and far in between. Number three, Texas, especially the Houston area, is full of loads that are paying really, really well. Honestly, if not for my fear about this particular trailer and my lack of knowledge, we would be doing so much better than we actually are right now. At the present moment, I am sort of crippled because it takes me forever to figure out whether we can actually take a load based on what we need to secure it, based on whether we have the tools to secure it, tarps, chains, straps, dunnage, bungees, edge protectors, and so on. Guys, this is a ton of new terminology for me. It's a completely different beast, so it takes me a while to get a grasp of it, and I'm sure I'll get better as time goes on. But nevertheless, I'm pretty happy with how we're doing so far, considering the lack of experience on my part. In general, this month seems pretty similar to last month in the sense that I don't have a feeling like there is a peak season or a holiday season. The rates are pretty much the same, sometimes worse. I do, however, have this general feeling that the market is becoming more manageable as a whole. States that in the previous month had absolutely no loads are now coming alive and there are actually loads to choose from. Now, the rates are not that great, but At least there is something to move. Anyway, guys, I hope you found this video interesting, helpful, and I'm really curious to hear your opinions on November of 2022. Did things improve for you since October, or did they get worse? I would really appreciate if you guys shared your experiences with the current market. And other than that, I'll see you guys in the next video.